Hi everyone, I'm Beth Keeton from Griffin Hammis Associates, and we're here today to talk a little bit about Social Security benefits, and not just Social Security benefits, but really how Social Security benefits can be used to help people move forward on a path to financial self-sufficiency. So we're really going to focus on how we can put those Social Security benefits to work for people and on their behalf. When we talk about this, one of the things that I think is really important for everybody to understand and recognize is that this is not an isolated conversation. Social Security benefits don't exist in a vacuum. The whole point of all of this is to help people get to better jobs where they can make more money and move towards greater stability and financial advancement in their lives. So it's really a conversation more about how we support people to move forward with financial self-sufficiency as a whole, and benefits become a piece of that picture, as opposed to a conversation about benefits alone. When we talk about benefits, there are a lot of things that I think everybody knows. So one of the things that is very, very common is that there is an amazing amount of misinformation and mythology that surrounds Social Security benefits. And unfortunately, most of that is really negative. What we know is that when people are operating guided by the myths about Social Security benefits, the viewpoint is that benefits become a barrier to work. So benefits are the thing that actually impede people from making financial progress and progress with their work goals in their lives. In reality, though, when we're operating from more accurate information around benefits and from a factual knowledge base, benefits actually become a support for people going to work, right? So they become a part of the success story and a part of the pathway towards greater financial futures. And so one of the things that we've learned through the years in working in this is that access to accurate information is absolutely critical. It's critical for people to be able to make the decisions that they need to make about how best to move forward in their lives and in their financial lives and their work lives. So we operate at Griffin Hammis Associates from the viewpoint that knowledge is power. I remember when I first started in this field years ago, and I was starting to learn about Social Security benefits, which was something that was really necessary because a lot of the people that I was supporting either were not going to work or were really limiting their work over fear of what was going to happen to their benefits if they accepted the job. So I decided it was really important for me to become more educated about the benefits so that I could better support the people that I was working with. And one of the first things that I heard when I was starting to try to build my own knowledge base was a little bit of knowledge is a really dangerous thing, right? And a little bit of knowledge about Social Security benefits is like a loaded gun. And I understand that because I think that trying to advise people when we really don't fully have the knowledge that we need can in fact be dangerous. But I would also posit and argue that lack of knowledge is even more dangerous, right? And that power really comes from having a solid knowledge base about these different programs. So what I would offer to you watching this webcast is that you don't have to be an expert in this. You don't have to go and become an actual benefits trainer to be able to make a difference in the lives of the people that you support. You just have to have a fundamental knowledge of how the benefit programs work and be aware of where you can refer people to if they need more additional information. So no matter what your picture, you do have a really important and critical role to play in helping make sure people get access to that accurate information in an ongoing manner. I always laugh and say I don't really totally understand cartoons, but I like the cartoons that have a picture and a phrase, so I understand this one. And it's a group of people sitting around the table saying, well, what if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? And I think it's a great cartoon to guide the conversation related to benefits, because I think we all know, anybody who's worked in this field for a while knows that concerns about benefits can stop work faster than anything else, right? And so we know that the problem exists, and in order to make a difference, we actually have to go out and actively do something to begin to change that picture. It's not just going to go away on its own. Couple of alphabet soup terms just to guide the conversation today. I've tried where possible to actually spell these out in the slides, but sometimes for space reasons I wasn't able to do it. So just some of the acronyms that you'll hear today. SSA, Social Security Administration. SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income, and it's one of the two primary Social Security benefit programs that we'll discuss today. SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance. It's the second of the primary programs that we'll discuss today. SGA is Substantial Gainful Activity, and that's a term that's used in the SSDI program. WI stands for Work Incentives, and work incentives are attached to both SSI and SSDI. And then just for fun, we have BFF, which does not stand for Best Friend Forever, but Benefit Fun Facts. So we'll approach the presentation today trying to talk through benefits and some of the more fun facts associated with them that people often miss. Okay, so to get us started, we're going to start with benefit fun fact number 1. And benefit fun fact number 1 is SSI does not equal SSDI. And this is a really fundamental point of understanding, right? So we have to always understand that these are two completely distinct programs. Both of them go through the same disability determination process. So if the disability that you experience qualifies you for SSI or meets the criteria for the SSI program, it will also meet the criteria for a disability for the Social Security Disability Insurance Program, right? So the criteria for disability determination is the same and is a commonality between the two programs. Additionally, the benefits for both SSI and SSDI are administered by the Social Security Administration, right? So two completely different programs, both of which operate through the Social Security Administration. And I think that's part of the cause for confusion. Beyond these two commonalities, though, they're essentially completely different programs. So the rules for ongoing eligibility vary. The work rules associated with whether or not you maintain the benefits vary, and their access to health insurance and the kinds of health insurance that you get vary between the programs. So starting off in your role of making sure that people have access to accurate information, understand that you can never answer an SSI question with an SSDI answer, right? The rules for SSI are different than the rules for SSDI. So one of the most important first points when you're getting started talking to somebody is to clarify which benefit they receive so that you're making sure that you're giving them information related to that particular program and not to the other. Okay. Benefits fun fact number 2. So fun fact number 2 is that we are now forevermore going to view benefits as part of the solution, right? I think historically in our field, we've really seen this, negative interaction, right, where benefits and work push against each other, right, where they're contraindicated for each other. But I think the more advanced view of this is understanding that it's not benefits versus work, but how can the two of them work together to help people move forward in their life. And the reality is that when we do comprehensive planning, right, and when we really support looking at the bigger picture, what we find are that benefits, the cash benefit that comes with either the SSI program or the SSDI program, plus the wages from work, plus the health care that's associated with both SSI and SSDI, ends up giving people more income, right? So they have more income and they have greater access to health care. And ultimately, all of these in conjunction with each other lead to more secure financial futures. So they're all going to increase financial security. And I think it's really important to understand that that's the goal. That's where we're trying to move, is towards greater financial self-security or self-sufficiency as a whole. And that benefits can be a really key piece of this. The idea with this more revised picture of things are that work is a part of a financial equation for most of us, right? I guess for some people who are trust fund babies, who have plenty of money and never need to worry about it, work may be a more optional thing. But for most of us, we want to find work that we're passionate about, but we also need to find work that helps us achieve our financial goals. This is not any different for us than it is for any individual who experiences a disability. So we have to begin to see work as part of a financial equation and understand that the driving point for a lot of this is going to be based on what are somebody's financial goals. Typically, if I'll ask somebody what they want to do, or I'll ask them about what their financial goals are, the first answer that I might get is, well, I can only work a little bit or I'll lose my benefits, right? So I've asked a work question, and what I've received is a benefit answer. And so one of the things that we would say is we need to start by asking a different question in order to help guide people towards a different answer. And the easiest, I think, and most straightforward question that we can ask a lot of times is, what would you do if you had a little more money? And if we start by asking people what they would do if they had a little more money, we can begin to help them walk through the process of really thinking through what their financial goals are. You may have to continue to reassure them, right? So you need to let them know we're not going to ignore your benefits concern. But for right now, what we really want to talk about is, what do you want from your financial life? And then we'll make sure as we go forward that you keep access to the benefits that you really need, right? But we'll figure out the best path towards getting to that financial goal. And then again, in this way, benefits really can become a part of the solution rather than the source of the problem or the barrier to work. Okay, benefits fun fact number 3. Cash benefits do not equal health care. And this is another one that's really, really important to understand. So both the SSI and the SSDI program do come with cash benefits, right? And the amount of those are going to be different depending on the particular program that you're receiving. For people who become eligible for SSI, they automatically become eligible for Medicaid. People who qualify for SSDI automatically qualify for Medicare. There's a 24-month waiting period, but the eligibility criteria is the same. So it is true that access to these benefits initially is linked to eligibility for the SSI or the SSDI program. But the really important thing to know is that once people are eligible, once they begin receiving these healthcare benefits, they can continue to access the healthcare benefits even if they're no longer getting the cash benefit from the program. So getting your SSI or SSDI does not dictate whether you maintain eligibility for Medicaid or Medicare. Initially, they're linked via the initial eligibility criteria, right? But again, the continued eligibility for Medicaid and for Medicare is based on continuing work rules, not on access to the cash benefit. For people who receive Medicaid waiver or HCBS, home and community-based support waivers, the continued eligibility for those are actually based on continued eligibility for Medicaid too. So just know that these two things, these two conversations begin to diverge once people are found eligible for the benefits. And we have to answer cash benefit questions based on the cash benefit rules, and we have to answer healthcare questions based on the healthcare eligibility rules, but they're not the same thing. Okay, benefit fun fact number 4. So this is SSI and work, all right? With SSI alone, and this is an important distinction, so for people who are only receiving SSI, right, not both benefits, but SSI, more work equals more money. And it really is that straightforward. There's a mathematical formula that's used to calculate how much SSI people are going to get, and because of the calculation in that formula, it is mathematically impossible to work and have less income from work than you have when you're on SSI alone. And you can run the numbers any which way you want, right? So with SSI alone, more work equals more money. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a minute. So the bottom line is, the more you make, the more you have, right? And we really want people to be able to understand that. All right, so let's work through an example or two here. So let's talk about Cassandra. So Cassandra is an SSI recipient. In the year of 2018, there's a maximum amount of an SSI benefit, and this year that's $750. That's the most you can get from the federal government. In some states that's supplemented, but the federal benefit max is $750, and Cassandra lives somewhere where there's no state supplement, so she's getting $750 from SSI. She's interested in office work. She's received a job offer to actually work in a local real estate office where she'd be working with the project manager or the office manager, and she could make $1,085 per month. She'd love to take this job. Her financial goals are to get into a better place to live, and she'd like to eat out more. She's a real foodie. And so she wants at least $1,200 a month coming in her life. She feels like she could achieve her financial goals if she had at least $1,200 a month coming in her life. So she's interested, but very, very concerned about what will happen to her SSI, because she's heard that if she works, she'll lose her benefits, right? And she's concerned about that. All right, so her financial picture now, currently, she has no money coming in from wages. She has the $750 coming in from her SSI benefit, so her total income is $750, right? And her financial goal minimum is $1,200 a month. So what we know is she's not going to get there with SSI alone, right? Even if it goes up a little bit every year, it's going to take a long time to get to her financial goal, especially when the cost of living goes up along with the benefit, right? So let's look at what would happen if Cassandra was to take that job. So if she were to take the job, she would have wages of $1,085 a month. Now, what we know is that because she's working, there's going to be an impact on her SSI check, right? She knows that. What she's worried is that somehow she's going to come out with less money or she's going to lose eligibility for SSI. The key question with the SSI program, well, there are two key questions. Number one is how much did you make, right? And in Cassandra's case, she's making $1,085. The second question, though, and the one that is equally or more critical, is how much of what you make counts. I told you just a second ago that SSI uses a formula. And in the formula that they use, the basic formula, what counts as income is a little less than half of what you make, right? So in Cassandra's case, a little less than half is $500. Of the $1,085 that she's making, SSI is going to count 500 of that, right? The 500 that counts is subtracted from the SSI benefit. So she did have SSI of $750, right? But 500 of that counts. They subtract 500 from the $750, and that leaves her with an SSI benefit of $250. Bottom line, her SSI benefit did decrease, right? Before she was getting $750, now she's getting $250. If you stop right there on SSI decreases, people get really, really afraid. That's just one little piece of the equation, though. The real key is what happens to her total income overall. So if we look at it now, her total income, she has her wages of $1,085 plus the $250 of her SSI. So her total income now is $1,335, right? SSI did go down, but her total income went up exponentially more. And that's the result of this base SSI formula, where I said it's mathematically impossible to work and have less money than you did on SSI alone. So Cassandra's working, making more money, and again, with SSI, the more you work, the more you make, the more money you have, regardless of what actually happens to the SSI check. Okay, so that's the base, right? That's the absolute bottom line with SSI. But the reality is there's even more opportunity associated with the SSI program than that. So we're on to benefits fun fact number 5, which has to do with SSI and work incentives. I loved Yogi Berra. I don't know if other people are fans of Yogi Berra, but of course he had just the greatest quotes in the world. And if anybody remembers that old Aflac commercial, this is the phrase that he used, and I just put in the word work incentives. So per Yogi Berra, money, or the Aflac program, in this case work incentives, give you cash, which is just as good as money, right? So think about work incentives as being something that puts more cash into people's lives for the SSI program. So within the SSI program, work plus work incentives gives you even more money, right? And we'll talk through a few examples of that. Okay, so within the SSI within the SSI program, there are 4 primary work incentives that we're going to talk about. The first of these is something called an impairment-related work expense, or IRWE, which is a mouthful. I apologize. IRWEs are deductions in the SSI program, and in order to qualify for an IRWE, an expense has to meet 3 different criteria. So number 1, it has to be paid for out of pocket, meaning the person has to pay for it themselves, right? It's something that they actually can get a receipt for. They've paid cash, they've paid money, somehow they're getting a receipt that they've spent money on this expense. The second thing is that it has to be necessary for work. Now, it can benefit them in other areas of their life. For example, an example of an IRWE might be somebody who goes and sees a psychologist regularly, and part of what they work on with that psychologist is stress management, right? And so they learn how to deal with stress better, and those stress management techniques then help them when they're at work. The fact that the stress management techniques help them during life and as a whole is fabulous. We don't have to deduct the value that's not associated with work, but it has to be something that is actually necessary in order for them to work. The third thing is that it needs to be related to their disability. So in order to qualify as an IRWI, expenses have to meet all three of these criteria, right? So it's a 1 and 2 and 3 kind of a scenario. For expenses that meet these criteria, expenses that qualify as IRWI and that are approved as IRWIs by the SSA representative, people can get up to 50% of what they pay out of pocket back in their SSI check, right? So again, remember the Yogi Berra quote, it gives you cash, which is almost as good as money, right? This is a cash return to people via their SSI check. The second work expense that we're going to talk about is called a BWI, or a blind work expense. As the name would suggest, BWIs are something that only people who meet the SSA definition of statutory blindness will be eligible, right? So you have to qualify as meeting the SSA definition of blindness, but if you do, then any expense that people pay out of pocket and is necessary for work can potentially qualify as a BWI. Two key differences between BWIs and IRWI. Number one, you'll note that there's no criteria that it has to be related to the disability in the BWI criteria, right? So it does have to be necessary for work. They do have to pay it out of pocket, but it could be something that is not necessarily related to their disability. An example of this would be people can sometimes expense in lunch expenses. So I'm at work, I go out for lunch with my colleagues, right? This is an expense that's related to my work. It's not related to my disability, but it is a work-related expense. And in some cases, that might qualify as a BWI. The other really big difference is that instead of putting up to 50% of what people paid out of pocket back in the SSI check, BWIs can put up to 100% of what people paid out of pocket back in their SSI check. So it has an even bigger return for people than the IRWIs do. Anything that qualifies as an IRWI should also qualify as a BWI. So for anybody who is considered to be statutorily blind by SSA, they should be claiming BWIs and not IRWIs. Okay, the third work incentive is the Student Earned Income Exclusion. And the acronym for this is the lovely SEIE, because again, we like big mouthfuls when we're talking about SSA benefits. The Student Earned Income Exclusion is a really powerful work incentive. And to be eligible to count this one, you have to meet a couple of different criteria. So number one, people must be under the age of 22. And they also have to be in school full-time. And there's all kinds of different criteria within Social Security policy about what defines being a full-time student. For people who do meet this criteria, the beautiful thing about this is that it's just a straight off-the-top deduction of work income. So it's a really, really powerful work incentive. You see on the slide on the little angle in the image that you can get at least or up to 100% back in the SSI check. But that's because a huge amount of income may not even be counted at all. So anybody that you're working with who's under the age of 22 and who is in school, whether it's the post-secondary education or continuing secondary education until their 22nd birthday, you definitely want to go and investigate the Student Earned Income Exclusion, because people can make a substantial amount of money with zero impact on their SSI check at all. The final work incentive that we're going to talk about, and we'll give some examples of each of these as we go, is PASS. PASS stands for Plan to Achieve Self-Support. PASS is another really, really powerful work incentive because PASS actually can provide funding for people. It's one of the only work incentives out there that can give people funding to achieve work goals, right? So it's not just reimbursement for expenses, but it can actually pay people to go forward and save money to achieve a work goal. There are a couple of criteria that people have to meet in order to be eligible for PASS, or to have what we would call financial PASS potential. The first is that they have to have income besides the SSI check. So they have to have income from another source than just the SSI check alone. They also have to have a work goal, right? So they have to have some idea of, here's what I'd like to be able to save some money to do. And then there have to be expenses associated with that work goal. So I would like to go to school to learn how to be a medical coder, and there's going to be a certain amount of tuition that I need to pay and maybe some transportation expenses and book expenses while I'm in school. So I do have a work goal and I do have expenses associated with that. If I also have another source of income besides SSI, then I have financial PASS potential. And PASS works the same way that BWE does in that it can give you up to 100% of what you're paying out of pocket back in the SSI benefit. And I said, well, we'll show an example of that as we move forward. Okay, so let's look at an example of the IRWE. So remember, IRWE is the impairment-related work expense, and in order to qualify as an IRWE, it has to meet 3 criteria, right? So it has to be paid for out of pocket, it has to be necessary for work, and it has to be related to the disability. So let's think through Cassandra. Remember, Cassandra was interested in taking that job at the real estate office. Once you sat down with her and really helped her understand how benefits work, with wages, with the SSI program, she went ahead and she took the job. Doing great, loves it. Cassandra is paying $200 a month in specialized transportation to get to work, right? So this is transportation that she needs to access as a result of her disability. So she's paying $200 out of pocket for that. She goes and she meets with her Social Security rep, and the rep says, yep, that expense can qualify as an IRWE. You're paying it out of pocket. It's necessary for work because it's what's getting you to work, and it is in fact related to your disability, right? So we told you in the last slide that what an IRWE can do is it can put up to 50% of what you pay out of pocket back in the SSI check, right? So in Cassandra's case, she's paying the $200 out of pocket. The IRWE can give her $100 back in her SSI check. So here's how it works. Without the IRWE, she had that $500 of accountable income that you remember, and so her SSI check was $250, right? With the IRWE, though, she gets an extra $100 in her SSI check. So her SSI check goes to $350, and her total income now is $1,435 because she has the $1,085 in wages plus the $350 in SSI, right? So you see a total increase to her in the combined income between SSI and wages of $100. Since she's paying that $200 out of pocket, it's really important that she knows to claim this IRWE, right? If she doesn't claim it, that $100 just gets left sitting on the table. So really great to understand how IRWEs work, and then in your role of working with people, beginning to help them figure out, are there expenses that they're beginning to pay once they go back to work that might meet this criteria and actually enable them to get more money from SSI. We'll look at an example now of BWE, just to see the difference between an IRWE and a BWE. So remember, BWEs are blind work expenses, and in order to qualify as a blind work expense, people do need to pay out of pocket, right? And it does need to be related to work. But the other key difference is that the person, the beneficiary, needs to meet the criteria for statutory blindness, right? So they meet SSA's definition of statutory blindness, right? So let's look at the same basic numbers, but do it as a BWE scenario instead. All right, so there's Juan, and Juan meets the SSA definition of statutory blindness. He just started a job at a sprinkler manufacturing company, and he's making the same $1,085 that Cassandra makes, right? He also has to pay $200 a month in specialized transportation. He can't drive, right? And the public bus doesn't run near his home, so he doesn't have access to any alternative form of transportation. So he's paying $200 a month in transportation. He meets with his SSA rep, and she says, yep, absolutely, that's an expense you're paying out of pocket, and you do need it to go to work, so we're going to qualify that as a BWE. All right, so the BWE is $200. Remember, the other key difference between BWEs and IRWEs are that BWEs can put up to 100% back in the SSI check, right? So in Juan's case, if he didn't claim that blind work expense, he would have $250 from SSI, the same way that we looked at in Cassandra's first example, right? But if he claims the blind work expense, his SSI goes from $250 to $450, and his total income then is $200 higher as well, right? Because he has the $1,085 in SSI plus the $450 in the $1,085 in wages plus the $450 in SSI for total income of $1,535, right? So there's a $200 net increase in his income. Once again, The key thing with these work incentives is to understand that if people are eligible for them and not claiming them, they are losing out on money. So we want to make sure that people are really thinking through what possible expenditures they have associated with work that might meet the criteria for either IRWE or BWE, right? So that they can make sure to meet with Social Security and claim it and then see the impact, the positive impact in their SSI benefit. The final work incentive we're going to talk through is PASS, and I love talking about PASS. We could do a session just on PASS alone. We could do multiple sessions just on PASS alone. So we only have a little bit of time, but I'm going to try to hit the highlights for you here so that it'll at least get you thinking about how maybe PASS could be an option either for you or for some of the individuals that you're supporting with work, if that may be the case. We said there are three main requirements in order for someone to have PASS potential, right? And so these requirements, again, are that they have to have a work goal, and there's a qualification on that within the Social Security policy that also says that the work goal must be feasible, right? So it's a work goal that somebody can demonstrate that they have a good possibility of achieving and attaining. Then there have to be expenses associated with achieving that work goal. And then the third criteria is that they have to have income besides their SSI check. PASS essentially functions like a matching funds program. It's not exactly a matching funds program, so I don't want you to get confused on that, but essentially it functions that way. And in order to have funds to match, people have to have income besides SSI. Otherwise, we're asking SSI to match its own funds, and that's never going to happen. In terms of what might qualify as other income, wages, right? So in Cassandra and Juan's example, they're both working now, so the income that they're earning from work could qualify or could be the foundation then for developing a plan to achieve self-support. Other benefits qualify as a second source of income, so anybody who's receiving SSDI in addition to SSI could have financial PASS potential. And really, I saw a PASS specialist one time speak and said anything that reduces that SSI benefit other than an overpayment. So if you know the maximum amount of the federal SSI benefit this year is $750, if somebody's receiving $750, they don't have financial PASS potential at that moment. But if they had anything else that was reducing that SSI benefit, if they're only getting $500 or $300 or $200, then they have a source of income that's causing a reduction in their SSI benefit, and that source of income could then be potential PASS funding, right? Okay, so let's look at an example. This is Bob. So Bob has a work goal to become a peer support specialist. He's had experience in the mental health system. He loves to connect with other people. He loves to be a positive role model and to actually help people set their own goals and start to move forward on them. He's done some of this within the day center that he attends and has gotten really positive feedback. So he really believes that this is a direction that he could go. In order to get a job as a peer support specialist, though, he has to be able to have a car so that he can go visit the different mental health centers in his area. So it's not the kind of thing that he can do attached to only one location. And he doesn't really have the money to buy a car, right? So he does have a work goal. He does have expenses associated with the work goal because he needs money to fund a car, right? He has money right now saved up for a down payment, so he has a little bit of money in the bank that he could use as a down payment on the car, but he's going to need some funding and some support with the monthly payments and then the initial gas and insurance while he's beginning to secure the job and build up some of his own savings account, right? He has income, he has both SSI and SSDI right now. So when we think through the PASS requirements, right, does he have PASS potential? Number one, does he have a work goal? Yeah, he's got a work goal, and he's demonstrating that it's feasible because of his experience, right? He has people at the center where he attends right now who are willing to write letters on his behalf, who've seen what he can do, and we know that this is a work goal that he could reasonably achieve if he can get some financial support to get there. Does he have expenses? Yeah, he needs to buy that car. Really, really key when you think about PASS, and a lot of times you'll see PASS used to buy cars. Buying a car is not the work goal, right? Buying a car is a means to achieving the work goal. So the work goal is to be a peer support specialist, but there are some finances or there's some expenses associated with that, and that is he needs to get himself into a car. And does he have income besides SSI? Yeah, he does. He has SSDI, which is great. It's fabulous, fabulous, fabulous that SSDI is an alternative source of funding that can be used to actually fund PASS. So we'll look real quick at just what it looks like, or what it would look like for Bob if he looked at funding, setting money aside to actually use money through the PASS program. Right now, his personal income you see laid out on the chart. So this is if he's not using PASS. He's got the $620 of his SSDI benefit, and then he has $500 or $150 coming in from SSI. The reason that there's a reduced SSI benefit is because most of that SSDI benefit counts, right? The formula that we showed you a little while ago with Cassandra, where a little less than half counts, relates to income from work. This is income from SSDI, so this is not work-related income, and the SSI program counts all but $20. It's a very unforgiving formula, but it's a very straightforward formula. So in this case, of the 620, 600 counts, and that's what's subtracted from the SSI benefit. So he has the 620 in SSDI, the 150 in SSI, and $770 total coming in. So you talk to him and you say, Bob, I know you got this great goal, you know, really, really motivated, really excited about the opportunity to become a peer support specialist. I know that getting to a car is a really critical element of making that happen. And there's this great work incentive through the SSI program where you can set some money aside. You could set aside some of your SSDI and you could use that to pay for the car. Bob says, that sounds great, but I'm living on $770 a month. I don't have any money to set aside. I don't know how I could set this aside. I can hardly make ends meet now. Here's how it works though, and this is where I say PASS is essentially a matching funds program. So let's say Bob takes that $600 from his SSDI check, the $600 that counts, right, that's currently being subtracted from his SSI benefit, and he puts it in a separate bank account. And that bank account is at a local bank, and that's his PASS bank account. He's just going to use that to fund the car and any other expenses that are associated with becoming a peer support specialist. If he completes the PASS application and he tells SSI, I'm going to do this, and SSI approves it, they're going to change his SSI income calculation. And here's how it would work. With the PASS, he would have $20 coming in to live on from his SSDI benefit, right? He's still going to get the full $600, but $600 of it's going into that special bank account, right? So he himself is keeping $20 of it. SSI now, though, says you no longer have any countable income. So instead of giving you $150 of an SSI check, we're going to give you $750. So the $600 that goes into that PASS account comes back to him in the form of the SSI check. His total income, totally the same. $20 of SSDI plus $750 of SSI gives him $770 a month to live on, which is just the same as what he had when he wasn't using PASS. The difference, though, is that he now gets a $600 increase in his SSI, and he has this extra $600 in that bank account to be used to pay his car or to save money for getting the car, whatever it is that he needs to do, $600 a month or $7,200 a year. Personal income stays exactly the same. So you can see that PASS can provide really, really powerful opportunities for people to access funds that they might not otherwise be able to access, right? And to hopefully, again, drive in the direction that we're going, which is towards greater financial self-sufficiency and greater financial security through work. And I think it's a really great example of how benefits can be a part of the solution, right? And in this case, again, a really powerful solution. The final SSI benefit fun fact we're going to talk about, so benefit fun fact number 6, is that Medicaid loves money, right? So we've talked through what can happen to the SSI cash benefit if people work, and we've shown how for a variety of reasons, especially if you start using work incentives, the more you make, the more money you have, right? And as people get more and more familiar with that, a lot of times they'll lose concerns about the cash benefit itself, right? The focus on the cash benefit begins to go away as people see we can make more and more money regardless of what happens to the cash benefit. But the next question often has to do with, but what about Medicaid, right? So let's talk about, we'll go back to Cassandra. Remember, and Cassandra was going to get that job in the local real estate office, working as an assistant to the office manager. She started off making $1,085 a month. She had some IRWs, right? She's been doing great. She loves the job. They are thrilled with her there, and she's been offered full-time work. Full-time work would take her wages to $2,085 a month. She would love to take it. She would love more money. When she set her initial goal, she said she needed at least $1,200 a month, but she could live a lot more fully on $2,000 a month than she is on $1,200 a month. So in terms of the raw numbers, she would love to take this job. She's really concerned, though, about what's going to happen to her SSI eligibility and her Medicaid if she does. So let's look at how this would work. We know that when it's SSI alone and income from work, what counts is a little bit less than half of what you make, right? So in Cassandra's case, what counts of that $2,085 is $1,000. So SSI is going to say $1,000 of what you make counts. Countable income is subtracted from the SSI benefit. So the maximum SSI benefit that Cassandra could get was $750. If we subtract $1,000 from that, that SSI benefit goes to zero, right? She doesn't lose money, doesn't go negative, but it just zeroes out. So she won't be getting any money from SSI, right? Her total income is still really good, right? So we know that she's got $2,085 of income. So she has a really substantial increase in her personal income. But the other key piece of this is something called Section 1619B, which is a statute in SSI policy. And under Section 1619B, if an SSI benefit zeroes out like this due to work income, two key things happen. Number one, people can maintain their Medicaid eligibility, and number two, they can maintain their SSI eligibility. They have to continue to experience a disability, they have to continue to need Medicaid in order to work, right? They have to meet all the other SSI rules, but assuming that they meet all the other SSI eligibility rules, zeroing out an SSI check is not going to terminate eligibility either for the SSI program or for Medicaid. The Medicaid standards vary from state to state. There's a state threshold amount. So you can maintain eligibility for Medicaid as long as you don't earn over the state threshold. There's fairly substantial variance among states in terms of how much that is that people can make each year. But in 2018, those figures range from $27,000 a year to $66,000 a year. So people can make really substantial amounts of money and maintain their Medicaid eligibility through the 1619B program. The other thing is that a lot more states now have Medicaid buy-in programs, which is an alternative means to getting Medicaid, and they tend to have bigger resource limits than the SSI program, and people can make even more money and hold on to it. So if someone is getting to the point where that SSI check is going to zero out, you really want to work with them to begin to figure out what are their potential options around Medicaid. But the key thing to know is that zero SSI does not mean loss of Medicaid. And in fact, people can make a lot of money and hold on to it. The other key with that, just the SSI eligibility, is it also means that if you hold on to eligibility through Section 1619B, if Cassandra did this job for 3 years and then all of a sudden couldn't do it anymore, she would just go right back on SSI, right? As long as she's still in the system, she just calls, reports she no longer has income, and she kicks back on. She doesn't have to reapply for eligibility. So really, really powerful opportunities associated with SSI and Medicaid. Okay, so now we're going to take a deep breath because we're going to flip. So we've been talking up till this moment about SSI, right? But now we're going to flip over and we're going to talk about SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, which is the other key benefit, right? The two benefits that come from the Social Security Administration. And I'm going to talk you through just the basics of the SSDI program and the phases that people go through now so that you get a better understanding of how work and benefits go together within this program. 3 basic phases that people will go through when they start working after they've become entitled to an SSDI benefit. Most of you are probably familiar with these terms. You maybe even know a few things about the programs, but what we need to do is get a little bit better grounding in how each of these work. The first phase that people go through is something called the trial work period, Once that's finished, they go into the extended period of eligibility. And then once that's finished, we call it the EP or the post-EPE. They enter the post-extended period of eligibility. These are always sequential. So you can't bounce back and forth between them, right? Once the trial work period ends, you go into the EPE. Once the EPE ends, you go into the post-EPE, right? So it's important to understand that these build on top of each other. With the trial work period, one really important thing to understand, and the fundamental core thing associated with the trial work period or the TWP, is that people will get their SSDI benefit no matter what. In the SSDI program, it's an all or nothing thing. You either get your full SSDI benefit or you don't get an SSDI benefit, right? So during the trial work period, if somebody made $1 million of income, they would still get their SSDI. It does not matter how much you make, you're going to get your SSDI. The other thing is that you get these 9 months where you can make as much money as you want and still keep your SSDI. And I think it may be helpful to think of these as lottery tickets or like the golden tickets from the Willy Wonka movie. And you only need to cash in or use one of these tickets if you earn over a certain amount. So in 2018, the trial work period amount is $850. So if somebody were to work and earn $850 or more during the trial work period, that counts as one of their 9 trial work period months, right? They essentially cash in a golden ticket. There's not really a ticket, but you know what I mean, just thinking about. You cash in one of your golden tickets and you get your SSDI benefit, right? And that goes until you've used all 9 trial work period months. They don't have to be consecutive. This could occur over a period of years. But you have these 9 months where you get to earn as much as you want and you'll still keep the DI benefit. Once people finish with the trial work period, then they enter the extended period of eligibility or the EPE. And my key phrase on this is that eligibility is key in the EPE. So during the extended period of eligibility, they'll have 36 consecutive months. They start right after the 9th trial work period month. So the second you use that 9th trial work period month, the very next month is the beginning of the EPE. You may or may not get your cash benefit in the EPE, right? And that's key. That's something that people are really, really concerned about, and something where you'll really have to work with people to run financial equations to make sure that they come out ahead when they're working, because we always want people to come out better for working than they did when they were receiving benefits alone. But regardless of whether you get the SSDI benefit or not, as long as the disability continues, people are guaranteed to continue eligibility for SSDI. So even if you're not getting the SSDI benefit, you're still eligible. And what that means is you don't have to reapply for benefits, right? If one month you're earning a lot of money and you don't get your SSDI benefit, and the next month you start earning less, you just call them, you report it, you get your SSDI benefit back, right? Really, really important to know that this eligibility safety net exists under people for all 36 months of the EPE, as long as they continue to experience their disability. During the EPE, when they're trying to figure out if people are going to get their benefit or not, they're going to compare their income, their countable income really, their earnings, to SGA. And that's that substantial gainful activity acronym that I mentioned on the first or second slide. And if the countable income is greater than SGA, they don't get the SSDI benefit. If it's lower than SGA, they do. This year, SGA is one of 2 figures. So this is the 2018 figures. It's $1,180 a month, or it's $1,970 a month for people who meet the definition of statutory blindness. So there are 2 different levels of SGA, depending on whether people qualify as statutorily blind or not, right? This really scares people a lot in terms of the whole, maybe I get my check, maybe I don't get my check. And I think with the SSDI program, same as with SSI, again, it's really important that these benefit conversations don't happen in a vacuum outside of financial conversations, right? So it's not just a question of, do I go off of benefits? It's a question of, what are my financial goals? How much money am I going to have coming in from work? What impact is that going to have on my benefits, and will I be financially better off? And that's what we have to help people solve for and really begin to consider in order to make the best financial decisions for themselves. Benefit fun fact number 9. So the SSDI program also has work incentives. And the phrase that I came up with this is that work incentives with SSDA or SSDI can help turn that SGA frown upside down, right? So one of the key things during once you get into the extended period of eligibility or the post-extended period of eligibility is this whole SGA determination, right? And the idea, again, is that if the value of your work is greater than SGA, you don't get your SSDI benefit. So really, anything that can impact that SGA determination is going to be powerful. And work incentives function as deductions. Think about it like taxable income and the deductions that you can apply. And the deductions, there's what you make, right? And then the deductions are applied in order to come up with what counts. So the same way we talked about with SSI, there's what you make, and there's what counts, right? And work incentives are what can be the difference between what you make and what counts in the SSDI program. Two key work incentives that we'll talk about today. The first one is IRWE, or impairment-related work expense, which is exactly the same for SSDI as it was for SSI. So if you'll remember, we said in order to qualify as an IRWE, people have to pay for it out of pocket, it has to be necessary for work, and it has to be related to the disability. The second work incentive that we'll talk about today is something called subsidy. Subsidy is only applied to SSDI, right? So subsidy is not a work incentive in the SSI program. And a subsidy is where Social Security recognizes that at times there are other agencies or entities that are essentially absorbing or funding some expenditures that otherwise would have an impact on work and pay, right? And what they've decided is that the subsidy affects the value of the work. It doesn't actually impact what you earn, right? What you earn is what you earn. But if Social Security says someone is applying a subsidy, they'll say the value of what you work is different than the actual amount that you made. Really key on subsidy to recognize it doesn't mean that the value of a person as an employee is different, just that the financial value of the work is different. And I'll show you an example of that. The formula for SSDI and the impact of work incentives is a really straight formula, easy calculation, right? So it's whatever your gross earnings are minus the value of the work incentives equals the countable income. And again, then the countable income is what's compared to SGA. You'll see that little image at the bottom of the slide just to remind everybody, or to state clearly, work incentives only matter during the extended period of eligibility or the post-extended period of eligibility. You can't claim work incentives during the trial work period. Okay, so let's look at an SSDI example. This is Malcolm. All right, Malcolm has some financial goals. Malcolm wants a nice apartment. He wants a car, he wants to go fishing, he wants to go on trips, fishing trips, he loves to go fishing, and he wants some money to spend on his girl, right? That's one of the first things he says, I need more money to spend on my girl. At a minimum, he is calculating that he needs about $2,000 a month to meet these financial goals. When he really calculates what's it going to cost to get in the apartment that he wants and then to have some discretionary income for trips and to go out with his girlfriend, he thinks that he can do it at $2,000 a month, but really $3,000 a month would be ideal. Malcolm is in his EPE, so he's in his extended period of eligibility, and right now his income is about $1,475 a month, and that's from a combination of SSDI and wages. So he has an SSDI benefit of $825 a month, and his wages are $650 a month. He works at a printing company. And the printing company, he's doing really well there. They've offered him more work and to increase his hours, but he's really worried about it because he figures that if he takes the job making $1,300 a month, $1,300 is more than SGA. Malcolm doesn't meet the definition of statutory blindness. So remember, SGA is $1,180. $1,300 is more than that. So he's worried because if he takes this job, then the SSDI benefit could go away and his income will go from $1,475 down to $1,175 a month, right? Because I'll lose that $825 from SSDI. Okay. What we need to know, and what we always have to, I think, get to be better and better and better at, is that these are not, again, esoteric conversations about benefits. These are financial equations. And the only way that we can really look at what's going to happen is to start running the numbers, right? To help people figure out, does this make sense? In Malcolm's case, he also has a $200 a month specialized transportation expense that can qualify as an IRWI, right? And remember, in the SSDI program, we just subtract that from gross wages to get the countable income. So we know he has this $200 deduction that he could qualify for as an IRWI. He also potentially has a subsidy. So as a result of the disability that Malcolm experiences, his production rate is slightly lower than that of his coworkers. So he produces at about a 70% rate, right? 30% reduction in production over what his coworkers produce. Very, very clear. He is a highly valued, exceptional employee. The fact that there is a variance in his production rate does not negatively impact the quality of the work that he does, right? Because he brings a lot to the table as an employee. But in terms of SSDI policy, there is this 30% subsidy that can be applied. And the way that the subsidy is calculated is you look at the $1,300 of gross earnings, multiply that by 30%, and you come up with the fact that he has a $390 potential subsidy deduction, okay? So if we look at how all of this could go together and impact his countable income, if he took the job making $1,300, $1,300 would be the starting point for the calculation, right? So he has $1,300 in gross earnings, minus the $200 that he has for the specialized transportation that qualifies as an IRWI, minus the $390, that's the 30% subsidy, gives him $710 of countable income. $710 of countable income is well below the SGA limit of $1,180. So he would actually continue to get his SSDI benefit. His total income now would be the $1,300 from work plus his $825 SSDI benefit, for total income of $2,125. Here is the really powerful key though. Not only can Malcolm take this job, keep his SSDI benefit, and have more money overall, he actually could even increase his hours more, right? Because his countable income is only $710. He can make a whole lot more money before he gets into the SGA determination. So we've got somebody now who's concerned and saying no to extra hours because of fear about what it might do to his benefits. And when we sit down and we really run the numbers with him, what we begin to understand is that not only can he take this job, he could actually increase his hours even more, right? Really, really powerful things come out of spending the time to look with concentrated and target eyes on the financials behind all of these things. Benefits fun fact number 10, right? So we're almost done with the Medicare. So Medicare cares throughout. So this is the other big thing. Remember we said at the very beginning is that cash benefits do not equal health care, right? They're linked at the initial eligibility, they're associated with the programs, but continued eligibility for health insurance is not dependent upon continued eligibility for cash benefit. We talked through that with 1619B for SSI and Medicaid, and it's the same for Medicare. So once somebody makes it through that 24-month waiting period, once they become eligible for Medicare, presuming they continue to experience their disability, right? They will get their Medicare coverage, maintain their Medicare coverage throughout their trial work period. They will maintain their Medicare coverage throughout their extended period of eligibility, regardless of whether or not they're getting that SSDI benefit. And they can maintain their Medicare eligibility throughout the period that follows the extended period of eligibility. So during that post-EPE, even if they stop getting their SSDI benefit, as long as they continue to meet the definition of disability, they will continue to maintain their access to Medicare. At some point in time, they'll have to begin paying different premiums, right? And so again, we keep saying this is a financial equation. These are numbers that we have to be willing to run with people and look at, but they will not lose eligibility for Medicare just because they lose eligibility for a cash benefit. And with Medicare, it's really, really great because you can continue to remain eligible for Medicare throughout your life until you become eligible for it through retirement, right? So no potential loss of Medicare. Changes to the money associated with it sometimes, but no potential loss as long as you continue to experience the disability. So we'll wrap up with one final real example. This is Poppin Joe. You'll see at the bottom of the slide a link to the Poppin Joe website if you're interested in going and learning more about Joe's story. But Joe is somebody who started a popcorn business over 10 years ago, There was an initial investment of about $25,000 in his business, and so vocational rehabilitation put about $4,000 in for startup costs. The Kansas Developmental Disabilities Council put in about $9,000, and PASS, over a period of years, through that matching funds kind of thing, put in about $12,000, right? So a fair amount of money that went in to get him up and off the ground. But for the last many years, he's had gross income of over $70,000. He's now paying employees to support him at work, so the dependence on Medicaid-funded supports has decreased, and more people are people that he's just paying to work as a part of his business. And he has maintained his Medicaid and his Medicare and still maintains those to this day. He no longer gets an SSDI benefit, and that is by his choice, right? At some point he decided it just wasn't really even worth it to get it anymore. So he quit claiming some of the work incentives, flipped off of it, and is now just maintaining the income from work and access to health insurance, right? So again, key thing with all of this, I think, is just to remember that when we sit down and we really look at benefits, we need to get better grounding in understanding how they work and connecting with the benefits experts in our area. So any of the CWICs, the people who work for the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Projects in any of the states, or any state-funded benefit planners, but to really sit down and connect with them and begin to help people not just respond to what happens to my benefits if I work, but start from the question of what are your financial goals, where do you want to get to in life, and then how can we work with you to try to pull that all together so that we can figure out your best path to your own financial future. And that's it. Thanks so much, everybody.